Welcome back to the Haynes Report. I'm Carol Haynes. Our topic today is After Gun Confiscation Comes America's Killing Fields. There's a concerted effort in the United States right now to implement gun control at the national level with the ban of so-called assault weapons. They want universal background checks and red flag laws. So why is it so critical that Americans have to be disarmed? Well, a look at history shows us that dictators have always disarmed their people before they began their mass killings. To name but a few, Hitler disarmed Jews in 1938, Mao in China in 1949, Fidel Castro in Cuba in 1959, and Hugo Chavez in Venezuela in 2012. In today's episode, we're going to look at the similarities in those countries with what's happening right now in our own country. Of course, we have to go check out the clown antics for gun control in my home state of Tennessee. And we're going to dispel the lies once and for all about these so-called assault weapons. And finally, we're going to talk about a solution. Let's look at China first. Here's a famous quote by Mao, who was the founder of the People's Republic of China, better known as Communist China. And this quote is very clear about why a dictator always wants to ban guns once they gain control. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party. Well, Mao stripped the people of their guns once he gained total control of China in 1949. This was a policy that Mao had begun in 1935 as his troops took over each rural province. So they just went, from area to area, slowly gaining support. Peasants were really alarmed when the CCP wanted them to turn in their guns because they thought, there's no way we're going to be able to defend ourselves. So Mao's troops lied to them. They said, the people's guns are owned by the people. The purpose of owning a gun is absolutely to protect the people. Therefore, the CCP respects and guarantees the people's rights to arm themselves. However, to defend the people and their community effectively, we think they will exert the largest effect only if the CCP manages these weapons. Well, as the Communist Party consolidated their power in a region, they would force the people to register their guns, and once they knew where these guns were, then the party would go out, they would force the people to turn in their guns, or they'd send them off to prison. By 1949, the people were disarmed and Mao had gained control region by region. Then the Chinese Revolution and tyranny began, and around 65 million Chinese were killed, using any means necessary by force, famine, killing people, imprisonment. Mao was responsible for killing more people than either Stalin or Hitler in World War II. A masterful manipulator, Mao fostered hatred and resentment among the masses to divide them. He mobilized the people to kill each other. He turned the masses into weapons of destruction. Does this sound familiar? Well, these tactics are being used in America by the woke crowd. Disarmament of Germans by Hitler in 1938, we're looking at gun control in Germany now. This was followed by Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, because of the shattered glass that just littered the streets after the Nazis went all through and they destroyed 7,000 Jewish-owned businesses. They vandalized Jewish homes. They torched more than 900 synagogues. They killed nearly 100 Jews, and they deported some 30,000 Jewish men to concentration camps. Terrified Jews were tossed into a small stream, and spectators were commanded to spit on them and to smear them with blood. Jewish businesses could be reopened only if they would bring in non-Jewish managers. Jews were not allowed to sell goods or services. They couldn't engage in crafts work. They couldn't serve as company managers, and they couldn't be members of cooperatives. Even Jewish children were not allowed to attend school. Then came the Holocaust, and you know the rest there. There were millions of Jews who were killed during that period of time. In Cuba, Fidel Castro, the illegitimate son of a wealthy Spanish sugarcane farmer and who became a lawyer, was a popular communist revolutionary. He supported the people being armed, and supported hundreds of thousands of weapons ranging from Czech machine guns to Belgian FN automatic rifles being given out to soldiers, militiamen, and many men and women and children, just so that Cubans could take care of themselves, so they could defend themselves. But that changed once Castro and his guerrillas had overthrown the military dictatorship of Batista in 1959. They took power, they took control, and they established the first communist state in the Western Hemisphere. Castro confiscated all of the people's weapons. In 1960, Castro nationalized all U.S.-owned businesses, including oil refineries, factories, casinos, banks. He shut down small private businesses that could not easily be controlled, though, by the government. And let me talk about that for just a minute. If you remember, during the pandemic, so-called pandemic, the big box stores were allowed to remain open. However, the small stores, the small businesses, the restaurants, the gyms, the hair salons, all of these were told they could not open or risk going to jail, which some did here in Texas, were thrown into jail when they dared to open. Yet the big box stores could remain open. The same thing happened in Cuba. And the soldiers went into private homes and took over those homes and moved people in there. People's private land was taken away. They even limited how much you could own, and then, of course, the ones they wanted, they just took it away. Castro closed down opposition newspapers. He jailed thousands of political opponents, and he ended elections. As a dictator, there was no need to have elections anymore. And friends that I had met a few years ago who had come from Cuba, now living in the United States, told me that people could have only electricity a few hours each day, and the government would control when that would happen. And if you remember, all of this, so a few years ago, there was a lot going on about smart meters and smart this and smart that and smart appliances, smartphones and so forth. Well, if it's smart, it can be tied in, like smart cars, so that the government can control and the government can shut down, as they have in Cuba. They can just shut the electricity off. And with smart meters, they can do that same thing here. They can even monitor when you're using your dishwasher. They can monitor when you have more people, if you have friends come or people to stay with you, because they can see how much the electricity or the utilities are going up or down. People who fled from Cuba told me that they could get meat only a few times a month. It was very rare for them to have this. Let's go to Venezuela and see what happened there. After his election as president in 1998, Hugo Chavez began the gradual implementation of communism in the country. Once he had gained total control, the next step was to disarm the people. Now, a number of people owned guns there, but nothing like the number of Americans. But they never thought they needed guns against their own government. They just used guns for sports, for killing game and whatever, but not for defending themselves. Well, it's amazing how when you have these dictators in here, that the level of violence increases. And we have to, that's another whole story that we won't get into here. But as the level of violence increased in Venezuela, Chavez sold the people the idea of a gun ban, telling them, well, if there were no guns, then they could be safe and they could reduce crime. Well, the people fell for his lies and voted for a gun ban. In 2012, the Venezuelan government implemented a gun ban, and the Venezuelan armed forces confiscated all weapons. The reign of terror began. So where is Venezuela today? Going back to 2001, Venezuela was South America's very richest country with the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Today, they have about 300 billion barrels of oil. That's even greater than the reserves of Saudi Arabia. Yet today, Venezuela is a communist dictatorship. They're economically broke with inflation soaring, and they don't have the money to drill their oil. People have to live on the street there, and they forage for food in garbage cans. Around 75% of the adults have lost 22 pounds because there's just no food. So often parents have to choose, feed themselves or feed their children. They even have to decide, do I put my money in gas for my car so I can go to work, or do I feed my family? People have to stand in line for toilet paper. Well, did a gun ban reduce crime? Absolutely not. Venezuela today has the highest crime rate in the entire world. It's one of the most tyrannical countries in the world, and anyone who protests the oppressive socialist regime is shot dead on the spot by government forces. By the way, Mexico has the second highest rate of crime. China is third, and the United States is fourth. Well, let's look at American gun control. Our inalienable, our God-given gun rights gradually are being stripped away by a tyrannical government. A Maoist American Cultural Revolution is raging at full speed here. Maoist tactics, rhetoric, and symbols have all been adopted by this woke crowd. The murder of 3 children and 3 adults in March over at the Nashville Covenant Christian School by a deranged transgender female is just another opportunity for Tennessee Democrats to scream for red flag laws, a universal background check, and to reinstate the state's gun carry permit process, and they want to ban high-capacity assault weapons. Why? All in the name of school safety. Yet they're silent. They will say nothing. They won't look at the cause for school shootings, and we know the availability of guns is not the reason for gun shootings. Well, some of Nashville's biggest music stars, Sheryl Crow, Casey Musgraves, Amy Grant, Jason Isbell, have jumped on this bandwagon. The Voices for a Safer Tennessee, a coalition calling for red flag laws. Well, the Southern Baptist Convention has jumped on this banana boat for gun control. They support Republican Governor Bill Lee's call for order of protection laws, quote, that are supposed to protect people from those who are a danger to themselves or others. Now, that term, order of protection laws, is just simply a fancy name for red flag laws. And what are red flag laws? They simply allow authorities to strip away the Second Amendment rights from citizens based on very subjective government-approved criteria, not necessarily on facts. For those who still naively believe that the Southern Baptist Convention is a right-wing, Bible-thumping crowd, consider this. A majority of those at the 2019 convention voted for a resolution that supported critical race theory and intersectionality. Well, a Tony Award for the year's Best Clown Act goes to 3 Democrat Tennessee legislators who used a big bullhorn to incite a large crowd of trans activist gun protesters that were down on the lawns of the Capitol building, and they invited them to come inside into the Tennessee legislative chambers. No, this was not considered by the White House to be an insurrection, since it was staged by Democrats. This was just the people exercising their First Amendment rights to free speech. Well, these 3 deranged lawmakers were expelled, but later reinstated. Less than a week after he was reinstated, Representative Justin Jones tried to carry a child's casket, a stage prop, onto the House floor of the Tennessee Capitol building after a rally on Monday, but was blocked by security. Jones then handed the coffin off at the doorway to Representative Justin Pearson, who was the second black Democrat lawmaker who was expelled and then was reinstated. These 3 jokers garnered national attention with their Al Sharpton-style antics. They even got themselves invited to the White House. Well, caving to public pushback and political stunts, Governor Lee has ordered a special session in defiance of his own Republican Party that refused to introduce red flag laws, and they refused to reinstate the state's gun carry permit process. So here's a question we should consider. Are most mass murders done with assault weapons? Well, there is an expert on this. An excellent resource is John Lott, who founded the Crime Prevention Research Center. If you'll go to their website, you're going to get some really excellent information resources. So you might jot this down, www.crimeresearch.org. That's crimeresearch.org. John Lott is the founder. Well, Biden is over there in D.C. calling for common sense gun laws, yet Lott says that over 92% of violent crime in America has absolutely nothing to do with guns. Now, there was a 1995 to 2004 national ban on assault weapons. And Biden claims that the assault weapons ban, this period of time, that mass shootings went down during that time. That's a lie. There was virtually no change in mass shootings during the ban. And remember, the ban ran from 1995 to 2004. Number one, not only is only a small share of murders committed with rifles, but number two, the rate of murders with so-called assault weapons has actually decreased since this assault weapons ban ended in 2004. According to John Lott, 55% of mass public shoots involved only handguns, and only 11% involved any type of rifle. Here's a question, and this keeps coming up, and I have friends and family and all who are always discussing this because they hear one thing through the news, and we constantly are hearing disinformation and misinformation and lies. So the question is, are AR-15s and AK-47 assault weapons? Many of them are actually small game hunting rifles. They're just the old-fashioned rifle, but they are cosmetically there's a cover put on them. Cosmetically looks like a military weapon, but it's not. It's just a small game hunting rifle. And it is not fully automatic. Now, Democrats will say the AR-15s and AK-47s are assault weapons, and they claim these weapons can fire unlimited bullets, unlimited number of bullets, with only one finger pull. Now, that would be what? A machine gun. Automatic. That's a lie. Fully automatic guns, machine guns, are absolutely banned. The citizens cannot get them. We cannot buy them. These were first banned in 1934 under the National Firearms Act. The law was revised after a Supreme Court challenge, and the current version, the current law that was in effect from 1986 on, bans civilians from buying fully automatic weapons. So all we can buy is semi-automatic. So there are both fully automatic and semi-automatic AR-15 and AK-47, but we the civilians can only purchase the semi-automatic. So let's see what those are. For the semi-automatic AR-15 and the AK-47, there's only one bullet that can be fired with each trigger pull, not multiple bullets. So each time you pull that trigger, only one bullet is ejected. The typical size magazine of the AR-15 or AK-47 has 30 rounds. Democrats want to call this high capacity. Well, handguns typically hold around 15 to 17 rounds of ammunition. And Professor Lott says semi-automatic weapons, which automatically reload the very next bullet into the firing chamber after you shoot one bullet, then it automatically loads the bullet into the firing chamber. That can save lives, because if you had to do it manually, put the bullet into the firing chamber between each one, that where we are today, you might be dead, because you might miss that first shot out there, and you could not stop an attacker. What if you had to stop the tyrannical government person coming after you? Democrats also don't want Americans to have these high-capacity guns. They only want us to have 9 bullets. 9 bullets. As I said earlier, there are new catcalls for red flag laws. Professor Lott says that the federal government in every state already has laws with people who are a danger to themselves or to others. These laws are commonly known as the Baker Act statutes, but in some states they're called by different names. But there are laws that deal with this already in each and every state and at the federal government. Typically, these laws allow the police, the doctors, the family members to have someone held for a mental health examination based upon somebody's educated guess. And these laws focus on mental illness. They require that mental health experts evaluate the individual. If a person can't afford a lawyer, a public defender is provided. Now, while judges can choose to involuntarily commit individuals who they believe are dangerous to themselves or to others, there is a broad range of other less extreme options that can involve monitoring or mandatory mental care without having to take someone's guns away. Despite these laws already being in effect, 19 states and D.C. have adopted red flag laws. Most of these red flag laws have been adopted since this infamous shooting down in Parkland, Florida in 2018. So here's what's so dangerous about the red flag laws. They're promoted as being mental health measures and a way to prevent suicide, but John Lott says that only one state's red flag law even explicitly mentions mental illness. None of the other states specifically require that a mental health expert be involved in evaluating the person. The only option given to judges is just to take away a person's guns. And that is illegal. That violates our Fifth Amendment rights. So in a nutshell, red flag laws are unconstitutional and do next to nothing to stop suicide or to prevent a person from killing others if they really want to. You know, this thing about universal background checks, this is a big deal. And it's been a big deal here in Texas, and at the federal level, they continually want the universal background checks. But let's talk about what that is. This is a check prior, if you want to go purchase a gun, they will run a background check, a federal background check on you. And what that does is to create a file on you, and it's going into a de facto universal gun registration system. That's a violation of the Second Amendment right of guns, as well as the Fourth Amendment right to privacy. This means that the government will know who owns the firearms and can just go confiscate those in the future. So just remember, this background check, a universal background check, would constitute a de facto universal gun registration system. Now, currently gun dealers are required by federal law to have purchasers fill out an ATF Form 4473, and they're supposed to keep those for 20 years. However, gun dealers tell me that they never discard the records in case there's a request for them. So with a de facto universal gun registration system, a socialist government would just most certainly obtain those records and would come after our guns. Any type of permit or licensing of a gun for either concealed carry or for open carry is a direct violation of our Second Amendment rights. Here's a question: why are we even discussing background checks or gun types? Under the Second Amendment, there are absolutely no restrictions or regulations on our ownership of guns. The purpose of the Second Amendment was to protect citizens against tyrannical government, against tyrannical leaders. The Second Amendment is probably even more important today in our lives than when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was adopted. Since our nation's founded, people were able to go into a store. They could buy a gun off the shelf with no background check and no registrations. If you remember, they would just go into some of these stores in the West and they say, hey, I need a gun here, or rifle or shotgun, or I need a box of shells. There was nothing asked about it. Even children, even a few decades ago, children here in Texas could buy guns through the mail, and there was nothing questioned about it. And these were not used to go out and murder people. Despite terrible conditions of the Great Depression, World War II, and the Korean War, guns have always still been very readily available here in our country. So why are mass shootings on the rise? What does the U.S. today have that makes us the fourth highest crime rate? What is going on here? Why do we have this? What is different now? The answer is that progressives have systematically worked for decades to destroy the family, to destroy our faith. Our societal foundations have been destroyed, and people are emotionally drifting without meaning and purpose and spiraling into depression and despair that can be expressed only in deadly pathological acts. So, what is the solution for us? Well, for sure, conditions are going to worsen continually. So Americans are going to have to take measures to protect themselves and our family. It's not going away. What we see is only going to get worse. So law-abiding Americans are going to have to exercise our Second Amendment right to carry weapons at any time, at any place, without background checks or gun permits, and without weapon or ammunition restrictions. For those who believe that we should ban semi-automatic assault weapons, how well do you think you will fare when a socialist government uses heavy artillery against you if you protest their radical policies? How will you fare if all you have is a 9-round handgun, as Democrats have proposed? We must protect ourselves not only from the government, but from evil, deranged murderers. Since we know they only prey on gun-free places, that should be a lesson to those who think that pepper spray is going to do the trick. It makes no sense that the government claims gun violence will be ended by disarming millions of law-abiding citizens. That dog won't hunt. Gun control is not going to stop criminals who will find a way to get a gun if they are hell-bent on killing others. Gun control is all about a tyrannical government disarming citizens so they will have no protection against that government. Americans must stop depending on our lawmakers to protect us. We must keep our guns and without government restrictions. We're in an American cultural revolution and we must be prepared to defend ourselves. In his announcement of his candidacy for the 2024 presidential campaign, Biden reminded Americans that when I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we were in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. He's right. Democrats are coming after the soul of America to destroy us. Biden's "finish the job" slogan sounds more like a threat than a guarantee of future prosperity. Yes, Democrats intend to finish the job of destroying the founding principles of America. They intend to finish disarming Americans. They intend to finish dividing the country into factions, to finish bankrupting the country, and then finish taking us down into a communist dictatorship. We have been forewarned. We must keep ourselves armed, as our founders did, to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. This time it will be our own government instead of Great Britain.